Welcome to my video lecture series in web development using Vue.js. This is Professor Janus Raymond Tan from the College of Computing and Engineering. For this video lecture, we will cover the topics about conditional rendering. Throughout this video, we will discuss the topics about the VIF directive, the VElse directive, the VElse if directive, the vShow directive, the VIF versus vShow directive, the VIF with V4 directive. The VIF directive. Conditional rendering is essential on any dynamic website. Vue.js offers two ways to conditionally render elements on our page, and in this lesson, we will be learning how the VIF, VElse, VElse if, and vShow directives work. VIF directive is used to conditionally render elements on your HTML using valid logical conditions. So just like this one, let's say for example, you have an h1 element within your HTML page. For you to be able to print or to make it appear on your page using the VIF equivalent to OK, okay? So we are binding the OK as a property of our data model inside the Vue instance, which means if this OK equates or evaluates to true, just like an if condition, this will be shown in our HTML. The example uses the VIF directive to conditionally display the h1 element if the value of OK, defined as a property of the model in the Vue instance, is equal to true. It is also possible to add an else block with VElse, which means if this particular if condition will not be equivalent to true, it will automatically render the VElse inside our HTML page. If the value of OK as a property defined inside the data model evaluates to false, then the h1 having no as the text will be shown in the HTML instead. Now to demonstrate the use of VIF directive, let us consider this HTML structure. So we have here our div id is equals to up as our root element, wherein three h1 elements are contained. So the first h1 element will display the title as defined in our Vue instance. This one, it will be rendered inside the first h1 automatically using mustache binding. And the two h1 will not appear unless one of these conditions will become true. So in our case, using the VIF, according to this instruction or this code, if the value of awesome is true, this will be displayed. Otherwise, using else, this will be displayed in our page. So using our awesome as the property of our data model inside our Vue instance, we define this as true. So which means upon loading this in our HTML page, we will be able to see our output just like this one. Okay, so Vue is awesome appears to be visible because our awesome property based from our code, okay, inside our main.js, this one is equivalent to true, which means this particular expression inside the first if or the VIF is equal to true. So let us see what happens inside our HTML. So let's inspect Vue is awesome. As you can see here, only the h1 for Vue is awesome is shown and not the VElse directive. Okay. Now let us check what will happen if we will manually change the value of awesome property using the console window. Okay, so using the console window, let us access app.awesome. Let's say, let us change this one to false. Okay. So immediately, Vue.js changed the value of our HTML page. So from the previous output, it changes to JavaScript is awesome. So let us check the window for the elements. So Notice that the first H1 which shows view is awesome is already gone. Okay, it is changed now into an H1 showing JavaScript is awesome as defined in our HTML code here. Okay, so since our value for awesome is now false, this will be also false. That's why Java is awesome is now shown. So that's how to use the VIF and VElse directive. Conditional groups with VIF on template. Because VIF is a directive, it has to be attached to a single element. But what if we want to toggle more than one element? In this case, we can use VIF on a template element, which serves as an invisible wrapper. The final rendered result will not include the template element. So VIF can only be applied to a single root element, just like our previous example. Within an H1, we are able to apply a VIF directive, no other elements. So if you want to render another H1 using VElse, again, it is just a single root element. If you want to toggle more than one element, we can use the template in VIF, just like this one. So if you want to print more than one element as a group, according to a given condition, just like this one, let's say for example the value of OK is true, then H1P and another P will be displayed. If the value of OK is false, this will not be displayed. Remember, template is an invisible wrapper, which means this will not be rendered in our HTML page. To demonstrate the use of VIF in a template, consider the given sample code. Inside our div, we have a template, and inside our template, we define three different tags or elements. So which means this will be dependent upon the value of OK as a property defined inside our main. In our case, we defined OK equivalent to true, which means upon loading the page, we will be able to see title, paragraph 1, and paragraph 2 in our HTML page in our browser. So let us see our browser. So in our browser here, we are able to see title, paragraph 1, and paragraph 2 since, again, the value of OK is equivalent to true. So let us inspect the code of this one in the browser. Again, inside our div, we are able to see and render H1 and the 2E tags because of the value of OK equivalent to true. So notice also that the template tag is not visible inside our HTML page because again, template tag is an invisible wrapper. Okay, so let us say we have to change the value of OK to false. So let's say app.OK as the property of our data model is equal to false. So notice that it immediately changes to not visible. Again, if we will go back to our elements, you will not be able to see anything inside our div. Again, if we will turn the value of OK, or to change the value of OK again to true, Vue.js will handle the changes. Again, the different elements are shown inside our div without the template tag. Again, template tag is only an invisible wrapper. The VElse directive. It is used to indicate an else block for VIF, so which means if the if block does not evaluate to true, then the one to execute will be the code inside the else block. In the given example, if the random number generated is greater than -5, the div with the text, now you see me, this one will be rendered. Else, the other div will be rendered. Now to demonstrate the use of VElse using the random number generator, consider the given HTML structure. So we have an H1, which will display the title later on. Then a div which displays the random number generated with the now you see me phrase. Another div which displays the random number generated with the now you don't phrase. So it will only display, so this one will only be displayed if this will become true. So random number is a property inside our main. So this one, okay, so random number is any value that will be generated using math.random. So if that will be the case, example, we generate a value greater than 0.5, this will be displayed because this condition is true. Otherwise, this will be displayed. So let us check our browser for the output. So in our case here, the output is now you see me because the random number generated is greater than zero point 0.5. So let's say we generate another random number. So I will press the refresh button. Yan. So this time, it generates a random number smaller than 0.5. That is why, instead of using now you see me, you saw now you don't. So by inspecting our HTML using the elements, what you see here is the div showing now you don't, and the other HTML which displays now you see me will not be rendered. Okay, so let us again refresh the page and see what will happen here in the elements. Okay, again, now you don't. Then this time, now you see me. So notice that the elements also, under the elements tab of our um, control, okay, we are able to see also the changes in our HTML page. So that is how to use the VLs with the random number generator. The VLs if directive. The VLs if, as the name suggests, serves as an else if block for VIF. It can also be chained multiple times just like in the given example. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4 different divs, which means this will be rendered once this VIF is true. Else, this will be evaluated, the VLs if. If this is true, this will be rendered. If this will not be true, this will be rendered. If this will not be true, this will be rendered, the VLs. To demonstrate the use of VLs if directive, consider the given example. So we have again the H1 that will display the title. We have the div for A, div for V, and div for C. Again, the one will be displayed here is depending upon the value of the type property of our data model, which is by default here is equivalent to C, which means what we are expecting to see is this one. Okay, so let us try to check our browser. In our browser here, as you can see, C is the one is evaluated and displayed because again the value of our type property is equivalent to C. Now let us inspect the value. Okay, again, the div showing C is displayed. So let us try to change the value of our property. Let's say up. Okay, the name of our element followed by type, the property. So let's say we change this to B. Okay. Yan. So upon changing the value of B, of type equivalent to B, again, it changes also the value of, or if updates the value of our HTML page. So upon seeing again or checking the elements, so we have here the div showing B as the content. So that is how to use VLs if directive. The vShow directive. Another option for conditionally displaying an element is the vShow directive. The usage is largely the same with VIF. Again, as you can see here, vShow is attached to a single element, which means this will only be shown once the value of OK as a data property equivalent to true. An element with vShow will always be rendered and remain in the DOM. So that's the major difference of vShow and VIF. So in VIF, it will only be rendered in our HTML or the DOM if the condition is true. vShow always render and remain the element inside the DOM. So what happens in vShow? vShow only toggles the display CSS property of the element, the display none. Display none, which means the value being evaluated in vShow is false. Okay? vShow does not support the template element, nor does it work with vElse. Now, to demonstrate the use of the vShow directive, let us consider the given HTML code. Okay, so we have the H1 here. Attached is the vShow directive, which has the value of the data property is voted. So is voted here as this defined in our main is equivalent to true, which means this should be rendered or this should be shown. Okay, so upon checking our browser, as you can see in our browser, finished voting is shown since, again, the value of our is voted property is equivalent to true. So let us try to check or inspect this element. So in this element or in this element window, okay, so we see that H1 with finished voting is visible. Okay, so in the console, for example, we change or we have to change the value of is voted. So let us change is voted equivalent to false. Let us see what will happen in our HTML page. So as you can see here, the finished voting is not visible, but in the elements, take note, what happened here is that Vue.js automatically modify the CSS attribute of the H1, which is style setting display is equivalent to none. Okay, so that is the difference between vIf and vShow. So vShow, whether the condition is false, it is still rendered within our HTML page. But Vue.js only modifies the value of our HTML or style attribute, which is display, is equals to none. Okay, so once we again change the value of is voted to true, the style will be omitted by Vue.js. So that is the difference between vShow and vIf. The vIf versus vShow directive. vIf is real conditional rendering because it ensures that event listeners and child components inside the conditional block are properly destroyed and recreated during toggles. So prefer vShow if you need to toggle something very often, and prefer vIf if the condition is unlikely to change at runtime. vIf is also lazy. If the condition is false or on initial render, it will not do anything. The conditional block won't be rendered until the condition becomes true for the first time. In comparison, vShow is much simpler. The element is always rendered regardless of initial condition with CSS-based toggling. vIf has higher toggle costs, while vShow has higher initial render cost. The vIf with v4 directive. v4 has higher priority than vIf if both of them are used together. However, we should not use them together because of the higher precedence of v4 over vIf. If we want to filter some elements out when we render items from an array, we should use a computed property. If we only render a small fraction of array elements, it has to iterate over the entire list and then check if the expression we set is true t. Now, to demonstrate the use of vIf with v4, consider the given code structure. So inside this div, we implemented the v4. So v4 is a directive to be used just like a for loop in our other programming languages, which means it will iterate over the persons, wherein persons is an array defined inside our main or Vue instance. So persons is an array having Joe, Peter, and Mary as its elements. Now, to iterate inside the persons array, we use v4. So for every person residing or for every element named person inside the persons array, we will check if that particular person is not equivalent to Joe. If this will be true, that person not equivalent to Joe will be displayed. So that's why here, okay, in our HTML page, we are able to see Peter and Mary. Okay, so Joe is not rendered since based from our condition. Okay, yeah, this Peter and Mary are the ones who are rendered inside each div. So if we need to say using the v4, it creates div for each and every person not equivalent to Joe. Okay, so again, that is the output because in our code, just like what I told earlier, for every iteration using v4, it will check for every person. If that person, this is the first person for every loop, is not equivalent to Joe, wherein in our case the first person is Joe, this will not be rendered. This will become false. Okay. Therefore, Peter and Mary are only the ones who will be rendered in our HTML. Now, VIF is with v4 is not very efficient since every time the loop is rendered, Vue has to iterate through every element and then check if the person is not equal to Joe. Instead, we should use a computed property. So this time, let us consider the use of computed property. Although we will be having a different or a separate lesson about computed property, let this be your brief introduction about the use of computed property. So in our previous example, we are able to use v4 together with vif inside this div. Again, it will not be efficient because for every iteration using v4, Vue.js will have to check the truthiness of your condition. So this time, instead of using that particular method, we will use a computed property instead. So the one you see here, the persons without Joe, is a computed property in the form of a function. So how do we do that? So here in our main.js, as you can see here, after the data property of our app, which is a Vue instance, we can define a computed property. Inside the computed property, this is a reserved word, okay, that is fixed. You will not be able to change that. Inside our computed property, you can list down all your possible methods that will serve as a property. In our case here, we define here the persons without Joe. With persons without Joe is a method which filters using the JavaScript code for filter, okay, the persons array. Notice that I use this keyword. So we use the this keyword if you want to access our properties defined inside the data within our computed property, which means I want to access this one. That's the use of these.persons. So inside this computed property, we are filtering, okay, using the filter JavaScript method, the contents of our persons object, which means for every person, that particular person which is not equivalent to Joe will be returned. That's why before displaying, okay, in our HTML page, we are sure that these persons without Joe property is already filtered. This will contain the names of the person not equivalent to Joe. That's why in our browser, we will be able to see again Peter and Mary as the output. So this is the more efficient way on how to implement VIF and v4, okay? The use of computed property. In summary, we can say that Vue.js provides directives for conditional rendering such as VIF, VElseIf, VElse, and VShow. Unlike VIF directive, VShow directive is always rendered inside the HTML. It only toggles the display CSS property of the element. v4 has higher priority than VIF if they are used together. However, we should not use them together because of the higher precedence of v4 over VIF. If we want to filter some elements out when we render items from an array, we should use a computed property. For this lesson's activity, using the given code of the product app from the previous lesson as the starting code, add the code so that the app will produce the given output. So notice here, after the product name, we are able to display in stock or on sale. So how will you do that? Consider the given view instance below that includes properties such as in stock and on sale that will be used to render the in stock using a P if the in stock property is true, otherwise render out of stock in another P. Toggle as span and display on sale if the on sale property is true. Post the link of your working code, create your own account here in the given link. This is the way for you to generate your own link and share it to me to be posted in the channel. So you have to create your own account here to create your own or to make your own projects and save it on your own folder. So in the week 3 channel of our MS team, so this will be our view instance having the in stock and on sale property. So that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. For inquiries, feel free to send your or post your questions in the group chat. In our next video, we will discuss all about the list rendering. Don't forget to visit the links in the references section for more information about our lesson. See you in the next video.